Hello, everyone, once again to the Scandalous Delights with the ever so delightful Sylvia Puentes, the one and only around the world that I get pleasure to play with. And I wanted to bring her to all of you. Hi, Sylvia.
Dun-dun-dun-dun.
Ta-da-ta-da.
Hello.
Tell us a little bit about Sylvia, about you.
Wow. It's a little bit about Sylvia. It's so funny. It's like, how long do you have? Gosh, a little about Sylvia. Wow. So I had no idea how happy I always had been. I had no idea of how different I was since a very young age. And I had no idea of how irreverent and scandalous I would be in my later years. It's so funny, I grew up in a very humble Mexican family in California. And, it's so interesting how we grow up to try to look for a definition of who we are, whether it's by culture, race, country you grew up in, and I found myself so outside of certain labels. Like I just didn't fit in. Growing up in a small little town in Northern California called Windsor, there was a lot of division racially between Mexicans and what we'd call white people. And even then I was breaking the rules. It's like, Sylvia, you're not supposed to have you're not supposed to have white friends. I'm like, she's in my class. But it's like, trying to somehow fit in and yet never fitting in. And yet, getting to high school and where all the cool kids are hanging against the wall, being all tough and serious, it's like, do you guys want me to ask your questions? Like I was always raising my hands, willing to speak out. And yet I never realized how different that was. And
it's interesting when you're saying that, because it's like, there's this sense that you never saw yourself as different, but also you never saw others different from you based on caste, color, creed, shape, size, form, religion, background.
And that was so, talk about so embedded. There was this force of the division of, socioeconomically by race. And yet it didn't make sense to me. And I didn't even know it didn't make sense to me, but I tried, and I really tried. It just didn't work. I even got kicked out of a class in high school. I would get into fights trying to fit in and be mean and bad, and yet if you can imagine that.
It's a little bit I can't.
Yeah. And yet this joy, it's like I would look around me, and I can only see this now, but from a very young age, I look around, it's like people aren't happy. I saw that my parents weren't happy with each other. And so I do everything I could to make them happy and like fall in love and try to do all these like surprise things. And, I remember my grandfather, very dear, sweet man, and he was in the hospital. And when I went to go visit him, they're like, Sylvia, don't make him laugh. That was like my word to walk in. And of course we ended up laughing. And yet that was such a wrongness. It's like, Sylvia, you can't make him laugh. I'm all, gosh, like, so there was always this desire for this exuberance of living that I desired. And yet people around me weren't choosing it. And so It wasn't until I came across some incredible tools and met some incredible people, Gary Douglas being the first one that during a break in my very first life class with him, during the break, he walked off and he looked at me and he's all, and you stop having so much fun. And I thought, oh, I'm having fun. Like it was this reminder. It was this reminder of this joy that I forgot existed, that I was experiencing different in this one class, because he was so irreverent. He was so different. And, and then the next class, like a day later, was with Dr. Dane, an evening intro, where he asked me the question, when was the last time you were truly happy? Which, if anybody would have asked me out in the streets 10 minutes earlier, I would have said, I am happy. Like picket fence, the dog, the two cats, the one child, Social
Yeah,
Security, insurance,
very important.
But it was like, and yet when he asked me energetically, like, when was the last time you were truly happy? I couldn't say I was happy. It was like he was inviting me to a different energy of happy. And I went
Yeah.
back and back all the way to 3 years old. And I thought, wow. So that was the beginning of energetically being invited to what was always there that I had no idea. And so this new joy and exuberance of living started to show up, and it freaked a lot of people out. It started
I'm
to
sure.
disrupt quite a bit. And I love our topic of the show, Scandalous, because I live a very different life. As much as I try to think that I'm normal, like anybody that can,
Well, that's scandalous, you thinking that you're normal.
yes, that is scandalous. I keep
But
thinking if I
yeah,
get back in the morning, I'm normal. No.
uh, well, what I love about you and the conversation we were having before we hit record was that how you like on the whole conversation about what we think happy is, like where we always keep thinking that something is, we'll do something, we'll get something, we'll have a certain bank account balance is when we'll be happy. But you were talking about something else, and I have a title for this show for
Okay.
all those newly singles, all those singles, all those not singles. That how can you be happy when you're single? And it sort of works around if you turn it around to how can you be happy when you're married. So, so I would love for you because I've seen you happy either ways, no matter what. So I would love for you to talk a bit more about that.
Well, first of all, I'd love to say the people that are in relationship, married or in relationship, and you're happy, like really that you're different. You really are, because you're willing to create with someone in a different way where you don't fall into the normality or the standards of what relationships should be like. So I've been single now for 8 years, maybe going on 9. So, and I'm so grateful when people kind of give me back what they see as my life, because I'm just living it and I never really think about it. But I had this dear friend and she's like, Sylvia, like I look at you and you're like creating and you're doing all these things like you're up on top, and down on the bottom is kind of like maybe relationship, maybe some fun play, but it's not your priority. And I thought, wow, yeah, it's not a priority there. I I've only recently begun to acknowledge how much I love to create. Like years ago, if someone would have said, "Are you a creator?" I'm all, "No, I just see possibilities." And yet it's such a turn on for me that
Yes.
there's things to create and there's places to go and people to meet and, consciousness to expand. And even consciousness for me is that space where people have more of them. They're more relaxed and have that relaxation of being them in the world and knowing that they have choice. So for me, this part, even about happy, it's like, happy is such an interesting word because there's so many projections, expectations of what that should be and look like. And yet I'm finding more and more is this level of relaxation that I always have choice.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
and that I actually enjoy me. And I'm nowhere perfect. I'm not talking about getting it right, but there's a level like I like myself, like I'm always looking to see what I can create greater in every interaction I have with someone. And there's times where I enjoy being, a cunt or whatever, but it's still there's this enjoyment. It's like, well, that was fun. All right.
Yeah,
But this
that's the thing. That's the thing. Like, what if you could enjoy yourself? Like, what could be the one weird person who actually likes yourself? Like, weirdo.
yes. And it's so interesting. I just this evening I was with my sister, one of my sister's mother-in-law, and she was talking about her husband has passed for a couple years now. She talked about he wasn't kind to me, he wasn't good to me, but I miss him. She goes, don't you miss having like a partner? And I was like, no, like I don't. And what I acknowledged in that is like I have so many amazing, kind people in my life. I was just in Mexico City. I'm in Northern California right now, and a dear friend, and she made me coffee and she brought me breakfast while I was on, a meeting, and I thought like, okay, so it's like she, so this, my sister's mother-in-law goes, yeah, it wasn't about the sex, it was the companionship. And I think, well, I think I would choose sex because companionship I have in many different ways, but that in
Yes.
itself seems like so wrong, and yet it's like, what would I like? I'd like to add more people that are kind, nurturing in my life. And I've asked for that and they show up. Like that sense that I don't feel alone, and yet I enjoy being alone. So it's like for me, there's such a different, and it's only out of like you asking me that I get to kind of reflect on what's true for me. I do travel a lot. I mean, I can be I hop around just about every week. If it's over a week and it's 2 weeks, that's a long time to be in one spot. And yet everywhere I go, there's always a sense like I'm home. I
Yeah.
never feel out of place. I never feel like I got to go home. There's no like nesting one spot.
Yeah.
People,
I remember meeting you first time, which was online because we had met
yeah,
in person, and you were like curating a set of interviews, and it was like from the word go and hello, it was like I knew you. So there was a sense of that ease of willingness to allow people into your world, having being able to be present with whoever and wherever you are. That's just such a gift. I want to thank you for that. Because I was like, oh, yay. Yeah, and I've seen that, like, not to say that it's like now everyone should start traveling, but you can if you want to. But it's really like looking at that, what's true for you. So, what are the ways that people can actually really start to ask or tap into what's true for them? Like, what are the ways what are the tools that you use or the questions that you ask that can?
yeah, it's interesting because I would say again, I've been choosing my living. I've been creating my living without really examining the difference of it in it I mean, I've been with the access consciousness tools and being in question and for 12 years now. And one of the things as I continue to choose my living, there's certain points that I know that change the trajectory of my living. And I say living because it's an ongoing action. It's an ongoing choice. It's not my life. Life has this sense of like you figured it out and you're there. And so,
Yeah.
and there was a moment I was facilitating, and there was this energy of allowance that kept coming up in the class, and that people were really grateful for, like this, like no judgment allowance space for whatever they were choosing or opening up to. And I remember the next morning I woke up and I was like, oh, that energy. Wow. Okay. And there was that moment where I acknowledged and was receiving the acknowledgement of the people. And I thought, oh, wow, if I can bring more of that into the world the way I know it to be, then I'm going to have that. Like, I would love a planet with more of
Yeah.
that, where people have that space, no matter what it takes, even if it means I die. And there was that moment where it was no longer about me. It was no longer about me, the individual, but it was really like what I could be to contribute a different possibility in the world with that space that I can be and bring easily. And so since then, it was the beginning of me traveling, and I haven't stopped. And a lot of the different classes I facilitate for people to have more of allowance for them, more of them like, I'm not as bad as I thought I was, like just to have a little more of like, maybe I'm not as fucked up as I thought, but to have more of that kindness, I guess. And I know it creates. So first of all, it is that, like, if you could bring anything to the world, like what is the energy you would like to see more in the world? Like, because I get we all have something, even if it's been buried, if it's that kindness, if it's the laughter, whatever it is for you, if it's beauty, we have a lot of artists, like you do a lot of incredible work with, wood and all sorts of things, but it's like, what is it for you? Like we all have one or more things that light us up. And so I would say, ask yourself, and if nothing comes to mind, start noticing in your everyday, what is it that lights you up? What are those moments where you engage with something, someone or something that just opens up this different space of relaxation or joy or calmness? So that would be one. And the other one, a couple questions that keep contributing to me. It's like, well, what's right about me that I'm not seeing? And what's right about this I'm not getting, for any situation and any moment you have with you? Because if you get to have more of you, there's something that occurs when you have that space of you, that no judgment or anything anybody says or anything that happens can get you down, because you still have you in that space of you. And then the third thing would be the gratitude. I remember, we hear a lot about gratitude, but I remember hiking through this mountain nearby here, and I was like noticing the rocks. And I was just like, wow, like there was just noticing the difference of the rocks and the shapes and the colors and I thought, whoa, wait a moment. Wow, maybe I live more in gratitude than I know. And there was like, those moments where I chuckle with myself, where I kind of get it in a different way. And what I've realized, just even looking at those three different things, is that what continues to create my living, and it continues to contribute to me also expanding my business and out creating my finances in a way that I had no idea was possible. And that's where I know that creation is not linear. For those people looking at creating their business, and they're like, it is not linear. And not until you begin to see it in your own life do you really trust that. And, I'm grateful. Gary Douglas, not too long ago, asked me, so you need to examine how you've created your money, or how you create your money. I'm like, what? Again, never really acknowledging what it's been. And so I played with it for a while, and I'm like, how? Because it's not linear. And yet more has shown up than I'm still surprised, like, wow, how, when, And yet there was a moment I was talking about the gratitude and amazement I have of the planet, and of all, and colors and light and shapes, like you said, even in a young age, like I didn't see that separation. He goes, that's it. He goes, it is your willing, how did he say it? And I have it written somewhere, but he said, it's your amazement with the world that creates the willingness to receive from everything and everyone, and to create the revenue streams of possibility. And so when you talk about how do you be happy and single, that's part of it too. Like I'm willing to receive from so many people that there's no such thing as being single. Like,
or creating sort of a unit where you're trying to just build on that. Like I remember someone asking me that, why is it that you don't, like, I think it was I was interviewing and meeting with new CAs to look at and he was like, what are you going to do with all this wealth? You're not going to have children. So what are you going to do with the wealth? I was like, there's the whole world. I wonder what. And like that, like it was an acknowledgement for me as well at that point, that it's how different that is. Because I'm like grateful he asked me that question, because I was like, that is kind of maybe different for people. But it's never really like about creating wealth only to fit into this one box of that only who, and then deciding who can actually have it. But when you're creating that from a space of what can you create, what can you have, what can that create in the world, it's a totally different space. And then adding your amazement energy to it, I like it.
And this part of, like, if I start to look at a couple of different countries I've been to in just the last month, but it's like every engagement, I'm there with that person. Like, if it is a young gentleman or that I'm enjoying the company with, I'm there and I'm grateful and I'm present and I'm enjoying it. If it's with a friend and we're out and about shopping or hiking, like I'm there with them, like receiving and gifting and enjoying and laughing. So it's like, there's maybe outside of copulation, there's all these different ways to receive from people. And that willingness to gift and receive and play and laugh nourishes me and my body in ways I had no idea. And then, yes, I enjoy copulating. And then there's that too, in a different way, but it doesn't require the significance of, at least for me in this moment, doesn't require this one individual person. And yet it's not taking away from anyone or anything. It's adding, I always look to be adding to both of us rather than taking away.
I love that. I would like everyone, is basically giving yourself the permission. So we'll give everyone the permission who's listening now into the future. You're allowed to choose whatever works for you. It doesn't have to fit the bill.
And then the other thing, about being happy and single is that we've bought such the lie of being alone. And I get that lie can only exist if you actually feel alone when you're with yourself. Because I don't feel alone. I think there was one, I kind of joke about it. Like people are like, well, Sylvia, you always travel alone. I'm all, I wish I was, but there's always people on the trains and the planes. Like it's never alone. And yet.
I'm like, have you been to India? You're never alone.
Exactly. And then there are those moments where all of a sudden there's these thoughts that come in, but I'm so grateful that I have the tools to question every thought that shows up. It's like, whoa, wait a moment. When it's a dense, heavy thought where I'm either worried, afraid, or somehow like there's just like this heaviness to it, I am so quick to begin to answer, whoa, wait, what is that? What am I aware of? Because it's such this way of limiting what we can be creating and choosing outside of what we thought was the only way to be happy and content in this life. And so I just wonder, and that's why I also said at the beginning, if you are in a relationship and it's working for you and you both are creating greater because you have each other, then enjoy that. I'm nowhere saying that that's not correct, but I am inviting the people that,
who've chosen to be single.
Yeah.
Even if they think that they haven't chosen it.
Yes. I mean, a friend keeps asking me, are you sure you don't want a relationship? I'm all, 8 years. I think I would have chosen it already. For all those people seeking, it's like, maybe you don't. And maybe there's something different you desire to create. And what is that? Yeah. It's like, what else?
I love that. Yep. I was going to say something when you were talking about, oh, well.
Here's another energy that I get that is something we limit, whether we're in a relationship or, I don't know, so many different instances, but it's an energy we call sexualness. This energy of sexualness is that moment you're gifting and receiving, like from everyone and everything. It's where that sense like you're turned on. So when I speak about that joy of liking me and feeling relaxed and the willingness to engage with nature, but also with people and receive, there is this level of this sexualness energy that is engaging with the world, the planet. And that energy is so vibrant and living. And yet what I see for so many people, when you're in a relationship, you cut that off because of what other people might think it means. And so it is such an energy of healing, of nurturing. And yet, I think we've made it mean something that it isn't or that it implies. And it's like, gosh, it's such a yummy energy. And, I've joked around with Gary Douglas. I got pulled over by a cop once and I was like, Gary, I behaved. Like I didn't flirt. Like I was good. He's all, he goes, you flirt just standing up.
But it's like, you know, flirting, not buying that.
But for me, it's this like, it is flirting for me is also the willingness to engage with someone else's molecules. like, I'm here and you're there, and there is so much going on beyond what I say, but it also doesn't mean I want to take you home to bed, you know? And yet
Yeah.
this willingness to actually see someone and engage with them and notice them, see them and hear them, that is something
Yeah.
that so many of us are missing, that it's not, doesn't show up in the world a whole lot. So
Wow, that's like being present with someone without an agenda, like without looking at what they're going to get, what you're going to get, but just being with someone. That is so different than most of us have either learned or to be. Or but when you're kids, you're playing and then you're done and then you go to the next one. And
I heard
like,
Gary
who can I
Douglas.
play? Who would like to play? Yes.
He said once that sex could be like playing frisbee, like, hey, thanks, that was a fun game. And I'm like, oh, how could that possibly be? Because that was such a significant thing when I was, growing up in a, Mexican culture and all. And I was like,
Yeah.
oh, I get it now. It can be
Yeah.
this joyful expression and exchange and playfulness where you're not judging each other and you're just enjoying that. And I thought, wow, have I been missing out?
Yeah, because usually we're like, what would be the right way to say this? What's the right thing to do? But when you're actually being present, it's like actually like meeting a horse for the first time. Like you
Mm.
won't just go slap it or like pat it. You'll be present so that you don't get kicked.
And it's interesting you mentioned horses. There was one of my, I'd say, what would I call that? But like receiving this very unique gift from a horse I had met. His name was Feliz, which means happy in Spanish. And I had ridden him, and he had been such this nurturing, kind space that he invited me for the first time to consider buying a horse. And I remember at the end just, touching him and saying, thank you for the ride. And then all of a sudden there was this energy and this wave of caring, of kindness that I received back from him. And I cried and I thought, oh my gosh, there is a level of kindness and caring that has no agenda. I mean, the horse didn't have any agenda. And I thought, that's possible. There can be a level of caring and kindness
Yeah.
with agenda. And those are things we don't often get to experience, in our lifetime, because so many
Yeah.
people have these hidden agendas and we're aware of them. So, animals, horses are such this way of receiving that. And yeah, I desire more of that in the world. This willingness to be a contribution, to be caring, and yeah, more of that. And so horses are
Yeah,
great.
they're just hanging around, willing to contribute, willing to be contributed to. What if we could be more like that? Yep. Yeah, thank you. Actually, I'm so glad we're going there here with this conversation because that's one of the things I wanted to create with this podcast. It was like just conversations, like without like agenda. But I know that when I get together with you and with others that I've had on so far and more that will be coming, there's just the conversations that we are willing to have from not just talking, but from the way we are living by
Yeah.
using the tools is such a different space and invitation that just being that in the world creates something different. And I would love to be able to have that available to whoever has the patience to listen to us
Yes.
or gets
Well,
the ping.
and this is the gift that we get to be to the next person that listens or, sees something. Because I didn't always have this allowance. I had been judging myself and buying that I needed to judge myself to find the correct way. And I remember when I first met Dr. Dane here, he was up on stage and I just remember going, oh my gosh, is that okay? Like he was everywhere, in multiple
Yes.
places at once and would jump from one thing to the other. And I remember during a break going up to him and thanking him. I'm like, thank you so much. I had no idea it was okay. And
Yeah,
so,
to go here and there
yep,
and there and there, and then maybe come to the point.
exactly. But to have that allowance at the same time, I get that that's part of the gift, because there is things that pop, right? And we judge ourselves because, like, oh, did I complete the sentence? Like, if anybody's dictating me, it's like, oh, I said that and jumped a couple different ways, And yet it's also a gift, because there's whispers that show up where you end up saying something you never planned, yet it was the thing that the person needed to hear. Or it was that story that showed up that really contributed to, someone or something. But if you're constantly judging yourself of how you should be, you won't allow for that magic and miracles to show up. And
Nope.
so, having podcasts coming on with you is like, I wish we would have said we had a script, but it was like, hey, where do we start? Okay, let's go. And yet I get the joy of living. It's like, start. And if you don't judge yourself, you always have the choice, and you can always go somewhere else. And I get it. Like,
and there's
also
no right way of doing it.
none. And yet there's certain things in our lives that show up that seem complicated or challenging. I have a 23-year-old son that, through his business, there's been different things that have shown up. And yet I go, wow, what was it like for me? Where were my challenges? And yet the willingness to receive from everyone and everything allows you to have so many more possibilities. So, when you're shutting off those possibilities and you think you got to do it on your own, it is tough, so I, hope to inspire him a little, like, okay, what have you done to enjoy your living today? Like, he loves to run. It's like, have you gone for a run? Or
That's scandalous.
Yes. last night he was like, I didn't go to the gym. I'm like, you have weights right here. And but it was like, no, he'd rather be upset. And then finally he caught himself and he did a little workout here at the house. So how many people have such a fixed idea of what their life should be like, where they should be at this age, what results should they have, and that judgment keeps them from seeing the possibilities they have right in front of them or around the corner. So if you didn't judge yourself today for what you haven't chosen, for what you haven't accomplished, what could you accomplish? You did choose. And maybe then open up the possibilities of seeing what else is possible in that moment. So
I love that question. Yes. And it has such a different energy. It's not like about like end result. It's just the curiosity of the question or what that is. And it could just be smile. It just could be a different energy of like going and touching someone. But the things that we don't choose, and like you said, like that rock. I have these lovely flowers that I have around the house, and every time that I enter the space, I just go, oh my God, you are beautiful. It sounds like a poo-poo, but what if we could add more things to our life that actually make us more joyful and be grateful for what we have? Where could we go from there? And by again, what we have is like ourselves. The more the more that I'm willing to be grateful for what I have, that is me. Because when everything else is taken, I have me. Is that realization of what you contribute and what you're contributed by. Pretty cool.
It is. And you're right. Once you have that with you, it's like, oh, you get to add the flowers, whatever it is, and that's an addition too. So
yeah. Really. It's such a lie. It's such a lie that you can't be happy or you can't like yourself for any reason. Like, what are those reasons that you put in place that you think that you can't like yourself or love yourself or love your body or like your body or enjoy your body?
Yes.
And what you have.
Yes. It is such a lie.
All those reasons that you're giving yourself, that we give ourselves, is a lie. Like, I don't have this much money in my bank account, lie.
Or I have these 10 things I haven't done, still not a reason. Yeah. I love this story where it's popping. I can keep on yapping with you, but this might be a long one. Warning. But I love the story by Christopher because I was looking at it
he actually had he was driving a car, and then it got bashed up or banged into something I can't remember, and then he had to go to the car, like go to the the company dealership of the car of the brand, which I think it was Audi, and then he was trying to get it fixed, and he realized that he hadn't renewed his insurance. And for a moment, he went into like, what? I'm such an idiot. And then he was like, not really, wait a minute. Can this be turned around? Like, what's right about this? And by the end of to cut the story short, by the end of it, he actually had a new car that he actually wanted, which was a BMW. And he had a few extra $1,000 cash back in hand to spruce it up.
And that's the
with
part
no additional money. Like
right.
He moved from a car he was driving to a car that he actually was wanting to get. And
but
I'm
I
like,
get
oh my
that's
goodness.
the magic that's available. Like the universe desires to give us what we're asking for, but you got to be willing to the courage to ask for it, and to have the courage of it not to show up the way you think it's going to. Because and that story you just shared, it's that willingness to go into the question. It's like, whoa, wait a moment. Because we go to freak out when we expect things to be a certain way that doesn't allow us to receive the way, multiple ways that something can show up. Yeah, exactly. Well, I have one for you. And this one I just realized recently. So I've always played with like, okay, the question of what would you like to ask for, just for the fun of it. And I remember years ago, I'm you know what? I would really like to have a jet. So one day I can meet up with friends. It's like, hey, want to go out to dinner? Be out in California. Do you want to go to dinner in New York, Paris? Like always like, just the joy of going and choosing. And the other day I found myself at dinner in Mexico City with some friends, and they're like, I don't know, we were talking about like, what else would we like to ask for? And the story came up, and one of the girls next to me, she goes, well, that's funny, Sylvia. This morning, weren't you riding your horse in Texas? And now you're in Mexico City, one of the biggest cities in the world, having dinner with some girlfriends. And I was like, oh, she goes, well, you're just really generous. You just let another 100 people fly, jump on your plane. And I thought,
I love it. Yeah.
And I thought, oh my goodness, the energy of having a jet, of hopping around with ease, is actually part of my life. Like that, where would I like to go now? There's times like, well, I have a free weekend, like having that ease to move around. I'm like, oh, that is the energy. So again, what have you asked for that's already shown up that you haven't acknowledged? And what else would you like to ask for? But again, if you are fixed on how that should show up and what that should look like, you're gonna miss the gifts and what you do.
That's true. Yeah. Oh my God, there's so many stories. I actually once, I remember sitting like in my bed and going, oh, it'd be so nice to like be able to have lunch here, like wake up and have dinner in India and then breakfast in Paris or lunch at in New York. And I was like, what's it going to take? And then I forgot about it. And then I was going to US for a trip, and I applied for the visa, but I never landed up going for that trip. But I got a visa for 10 years. And the next thing that I know, that there was a class happening in Michigan, and I was like, oh, I have the visa. Can I go? Yes. So in like 2 days time, I packed up and I went to US. And I didn't have the money before I chose it, but it just showed up. So it's so interesting, like what can show up when you start choosing. And so what are you asking for? What are you not asking for that you can actually ask for that could show up with ease?
And
this is such a different conversation.
Totally. But it's like the willingness also to ask it and to willing it to show up in the most ridiculous ways. Like, because
so would you have to be ridiculous to be able to allow it to show up ridiculously?
Yeah, because it's not going to make sense. It's not going to make
in for that.
Yes.
Let's be ridiculous.
Because, you hear it like us, we have several stories or several other stories that people shared where it was ridiculous of how that showed up. And you're
Yeah,
like, how does that occur? But it is the willingness to ask without being attached to
yeah.
when or how, and just knowing that it will. And
That
yes,
and knowing
and
that
so
you're choosing it, it's not happening to you. You chose it.
yes,
Like the more you realize that, the more you have the power on the of the and the potency of of your ask.
exactly. And I love it. There's been different people that have recommended this exercise, but it's like, take a piece of paper and what are 10 things you'd like to ask for that you would love to show up in your life? Write
Yeah,
them and then put it in a drawer, put it away, and just let them go. And then
yeah,
allow yourself to take a peek in a year or two, or maybe find it by surprise in a couple years. And you may be amazed of what that is. It's
yeah.
like my story with the jet, it's like, it's the funniest thing to perceive the energy. And yet the reality that I'm living
That's
now, I had no
amazing.
idea. I had no idea I could live this. I had no idea I could choose it. I had no idea I would have the ease with money. I had no idea. And yet along the way, there have been different choices that have
Yeah.
seemed ridiculous, um, small
But you
choices.
always knew that you wanted more and something else was possible.
I remember there's
You
this
look at
one,
your family and you go, really, this can't be all it.
I remember I was probably, I don't
What
know,
am I
five,
doing here?
6 years old. And, I have 4 sisters and there was always extra family living with us. So always a full space. And I remember being by
Yes,
myself
me too.
outside, 6 years old, maybe 7, but 6 for sure, around there, and looking up to the sky going, yeah, like, but it was the sense like, oh, someday I'll be that big. But I at that age, I thought tall, right? So I can
Yeah,
only imagine like the men on the circus with stilts. But yet there was this energy now I know that I just knew there was so much more available.
yeah,
And that was at 6 years old. So how many things did we know were available at a really young age that got buried underneath everything we saw, and what, all the lies about the limitations, and
yeah.
yeah. And that now is like, oh wow, I did know there was more. I did desire more. And actually that was a wrongness. That was, Sylvia, just be satisfied. Like, I was like, okay, Sylvia, it's time to settle down. It's 9 p.m. I'm all, okay, like go to bed. And yet there was always this
Yeah.
energy that seemed
And you
too
can
much.
think of 20 things you can still be and do.
Exactly. I'm just getting started.
I had things like I had to hang from the shower. Wait a minute. And like fill up my bathroom floor with water so I can try and swim.
Oh, all these sorts of things. Yeah. So, gosh, thank you. Thank you for the conversation, because there is an energy here, if most of you, that have stayed with us this long can perceive, that does seem
Yeah,
ridiculous and almost unbelievable. And yet,
yeah.
you can gift yourself that space as you continue to choose the lightness and what works for you. And I don't mean what works for you with excluding everybody else. It's like include everyone else.
It doesn't work to exclude you, everyone else.
It doesn't
It's a
actually
little
create.
hard.
There's no such thing actually, but yes, yeah, there's so much more available. And I wonder too, what else could I ask for that I haven't been willing to ask for? That seems even
Yeah.
impossible to me now. It's like, oh wow, universe. So what other choices are available for all of us now?
Yes, please. Thank you so much, Sylvia. This is so much fun. Just chatting with you because every time, like I don't know about anyone else, but I feel more space and more like like different question in my world which wasn't there before, and just this awareness of like all those places where, and this whole conversation might seem a little weird initially, but if we just give it a go, it is an invitation to go beyond the right and wrong to what's actually going to work. And we think the right and wrong is going to give us the right way, which is going to work. And then we never seem to find it sort of matching. And the other invitation is the willingness to really ask, what are the conversations that you would like to have? Because that's one of the things that this was created from. Like, what if the magic and the miracles and the possibilities that we all have available, which is going to be different for each one of us, is the conversation that we can have more easily. And I know that we do in so many different places, and we have been lucky enough to ask for it and choose it, and that you can ask for it. Until then, you have us. And
Yes.
but also, what conversations is each one of us the source of that we haven't chosen yet? That if we did, we'll create a different world that we all get to play in.
Yeah, that. And with that conversation, I would say, what is the energy that you actually contribute to every space you walk into? Because there is what we speak, and then there's what we be that doesn't have a definition, and yet it can change so much. So I get, I'm grateful, especially for Dr. Dane, that has been inviting us to a world of acknowledging the energetics of our contribution and what we can contribute to beyond the words. That, wow, I just wonder, like, what else could we acknowledge, and if you're close to animals, animals know, right? They'll approach those energies and they'll run away from the others. So it's like, what if that's everything in the world as well? That as you're choosing a certain energy, like, more will come. So not that there's a right or a wrong energy, but it's like, wow, what gift are we as we walk around this planet in every space, and keep asking, what else do you know? What else do you be? And if you don't have that sense of it now, keep asking, keep asking and explore, the access consciousness tools, the body processes, because it all contributes to more of you showing up as you truly be. So how much more fun can we have? And whether you're single or not, but hey, like, really, what if what if it truly was about, what can I choose today to add more joy and fun right away? Because I was cleaning up the space the other day and adding new plants, but there was such a joy in cleaning. I know that sounds weird, but for that small space or whatever, and I didn't go through the whole house, but it's like, what could you choose as your everyday activity to add a little more joy to that? So thank you for the conversation and willing to dance around so many topics.
This was, I'm going to listen to it again. This was a fun conversation. Thank you so much. I adore you. I look forward to meeting you in person soon. And Huggy.
Yes, it's been a long time. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thanks everyone for tuning in. And there's more coming, and lots more fun people, magical people. Yay.